So today we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. I don't think I've actually made a video on this yet, but the quadratic formula, if you don't know what it is a pretty simplistic equation, formula, equation, whatever. I forget the proper terminology. But if you have one second. You have an equation like this, or even just this. This is a quadratic equation. And what that means is you have a squared x and an x and some other stuff. So what you want to do sometimes is figure out what value of x will give you an output of 0. So what that means on a graph is, where does the graph equal 0? So what y output, so when the graph hits 0 on the y-axis, what is that x value? If I had a picture, it'd be a little easier to show you. But if you remember back in the last video, I showed you when the parabola hits the x-axis, y is equal to 0, because the x-axis is drawn at y is equal to 0. Alright, so we want to know what x has to equal to for this equation to be true, because then it would be equal to 0. So you use this. This is the actual formula that you would use, and you're supposed to memorize it. X is equal to plus or minus the square root of b squared b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And sometimes there's a song that goes along with it. So you have this, which is very similar inputs, very similar outputs. It's the same pattern again and again and again. You can do it by hand. You can put it in the numbers into your calculator and run the calculation, or you can make a program that does it. So if we just have to run this, why don't we have 2 lines? Why do I have all this hooba-jooba? Well, if you didn't have this, it would be pretty much 2 lines. I have this label y because this right here, right there, the square root. Alright, so if you have the square root of something, if you have the square root of 9, it's 3, right? So why do I have a whole bunch of hooba-jooba if we just have a square root that's a problem? Like, is it really a problem? And the answer is yes, it is a problem, because for the sole reason if b squared is not greater than 4ac, or if 4ac is greater than b squared, then you're going to get a negative number here. And if you've never dealt with square roots and negative numbers before, I encourage you to put that in your calculator and do the calculation. Just put square root of -1 and read what it tells you. And then go Google that if you don't know what that is. But if you do that in your calculator, you tell it to take the square root of a negative number, it's going to throw you an error. So we have to make sure that it doesn't throw us an error, right? It would be kind of, it would mess with the flow of things if every time you had a negative number here, which gives you a complex or imaginary solution, then you'd have to, interrupt the flow of you doing math. You'd be like, oh, why is that again? Oh yeah, because there's a, right? If it just tells you that there aren't any real solutions because it's an imaginary number or imaginary outcome, then you know that. So you have to check for that. So b squared is less than 4ac, which means that this is going to be negative. Then tell the user that there's no real solutions. And then we're going to go to y, which skips this whole display bit, and then label y. So this go to, or you could really just put a stop there instead of having to put a go to and a label. But that avoids this calculation so that it won't throw you an error for doing the square root of a negative number. So if you get rid of this, voila, this is your program. And if you want to get really, really fancy, I haven't tried this, but you should be able to just put stop here. And voila. And if you know that you're not going to put in any, solutions that are not going to be real, then you can get rid of this and then just deal with the fact that it tells you, hey, you can't do that calculation. So there's that. That's all I've got. That was a pretty short video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment if you have any suggestions, comments, questions about things that I have, programs that I've made, programs that others have made, programs that you want to see me make, questions on syntax or commands, how those are used. If any of my other videos haven't been expansive enough, explicit enough, which reminds me, I actually have, I'll write that down right now. Cool. Other than that, I already said myself, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And don't forget to show your work. That's the most important thing I always forget. Don't forget to show your work. Just because you have the right answer doesn't mean your teacher's going to say, oh, you didn't need to show work because you got the right answer, right? They don't want you cheating, so make sure you can show your work, which you can get your calculator to do. I'm not going to show you how to do that. You can figure it out for yourself. See you guys in the next one.